Well, good afternoon again. I'm back. My name's Jane Scott, and as I said, I'm president of the Metropolitan Club, and I get to do all kinds of cool things like this every week. Maybe not quite this cool. We don't have beer every week, but that's great. Today's forum, The Brewing Business is Hopping, takes a look at the rich history and the current booming craft beer business here in Central Ohio. I want to specifically thank our sponsor this week, the Edwards Companies. Many of you may not know, but there's a connection to the Edwards Companies to this program. They're not only developers in the city, but Jeff Edwards many years ago saw the potential in the brewery district, the old abandoned brewery buildings, and he bought those buildings, or he and his family bought those buildings, and one of the first projects they did was to connect with Scott Francis, and Jeff and Scott created the first microbrewery in the community, called it the Columbus Brewing Company. So some of you may be familiar with that, and Scott Francis actually introduced me to Jeff Edwards, and I was able to do Greystone Winery in the brewery district. So there's a connection there that's kind of fun. So we appreciate the Edwards Company for their support today, and certainly our partners, the Ohio Craft Brewers Association, for their support for this forum. So let's thank our partner and our sponsors. Our speakers today represent some of the best and brightest, and I would say the most talented, in and around the beer business in Central Ohio. Joining us, as I said, Scott Francis. He's the brewmaster at the new Temperance Brewing Company, and I do mean new. It's opening today, correct? So God bless you for being here on a very, very hectic day. And I also want to point out that his wife, Nina, is here as a special guest of ours. And Scott, as I mentioned, is kind of the bona fide godfather of the brewing industry and the microbrewing industry in Columbus. So we're happy that Scott was able to be with us. Eric Bean, owner of the Columbus Brewing Company in its newest and latest version, and president of the Ohio Craft Brewers Association. And Mary MacDonald, Executive Director of the Ohio Craft Brewers Association. And how do you get a job like that?
I have a lot of good jobs.
Yes, you have. And Travis Hoewischer is Editor-in-Chief of 614 Magazine and was an obvious choice for us for moderating this panel today because many of the articles that show up in 614 Magazine, and for your support also for the Metropolitan Club. So, Travis, take it away. Let's have some fun.
Thank you to Jane and the Metropolitan Club. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but I think I do. It's like, there's probably been a lot of photos of you in that magazine drinking a local beer. I couldn't be happier to be here today. I think this is where we're going to kind of kick off, but I don't think that I would have thought 10 years ago that I'd be sitting in the historic downtown club talking about beer at lunchtime on a Wednesday. I might have been talking about beer on a Wednesday, but maybe in not such a fancy establishment. And I'm certain it wouldn't have been followed by make sure you tweet. What an amazing evolution that we've come to as a city, where it's like two things you need to take away from today: make sure you get some beer on the way out, and make sure you tweet. As she said, I'm the editor for 614 Magazine, and we recently have launched a quarterly publication called Stock and Barrel. The only reason why I mention that is that truly, the craft brew industry in Columbus and its boom has pretty much coincided with the origin of our magazine. And so from the moment that we started putting this out, people like everyone on our panel here have been doing nothing but put out innovative products and continue to push the envelope and kind of put Columbus on the map. And I would say beyond maybe a certain ice cream brand, craft beer probably is the most notable thing about Columbus's evolution right now. So I think we're going to start with Scott. Scott, you're a very humble guy. Do you get tired of us calling you the godfather, grandfather?
It makes me feel old.
You'll notice, though, in the magazine, I referred to you as the king of beers, which I thought was a nice, slight homage to Budweiser. I hope somebody thought that was clever. Why don't you kind of catch us up a little bit, because this is the quote-unquote third wave of craft brew here in Columbus, and you kind of been involved with several stages of that. Maybe kind of bring us up to speed as to how we got to where we are right now in 2014.
I started a homebrew store in Clintonville called the Winemaker Shop in 1974, and still own it with my wife Nina, and our two boys work there. So for a long time, I was interested in making stuff at home. You could make pretty good wine at home. You couldn't make good beer at home at the time because the quality of ingredients was terrible, and you didn't know what beers tasted like that were other than American domestic beers. As time went by, some beers started to come on to the market, Bass Ale and Guinness and Watney's, and where you started to get some flavors in beers. Not that they were better, they were just different. And then later on, you started to hear about stuff starting to happen on both coasts. And so I'm sitting there in the mid '80s, going, I want to do that. I want to be a brewer. Which I've never met any guy that doesn't want to be a brewmaster. Maybe there's one here. But it's something that everybody wants to do, especially somebody that once you start making some good beer at home, everybody wants to do it, and that's a good thing. So I wanted to be a brewer. Well, I didn't have a lot of sense then, not that I do now, but it takes a lot of money to start a brewery, and I didn't have that. So, but I had a friend that was in a local prominent family, Harley Schottenstein. I don't know if anybody knows Harley, but he was an old friend of mine. It still is. And Harley called me one time. He says, "There's this family that are going to start a brewery, or this project in the brewery district, these Edwards." And he gave me Jeff Edwards' phone number, and so I got a hold of the Edwards, and they took me down and showed me these buildings, and I'm just looking at them like you can't put a brewery here. I didn't know that all it took was money. Anyway, so we came up with the plan, and we put in the first edition of the Columbus Brewing Company, which was on Front Street. There was a restaurant called Gibby's, and it was in that building there. At around that same time, there was a brewery that opened up on High Street a few months later called Hoster's. Now, there had been, back right before Prohibition, there had been a Hoster's Brewery and a Columbus Brewing Company. In fact, they had merged. But Hoster's was an old family name in town, and so the Hoster Brewery opened up on South High Street, 505 South High, and they did a heck of a job. Their beers were just really good. When I was getting ready to open the Columbus Brewing, I went to this brew pub that was just getting ready to open in Chicago called Goose Island, and they had this plan that if you went there and gave them $1,000 cash, which was a lot of money back in 1989, it's not now, but it was then. Then you could spend a week with the brewer, and so I did that. Well, it was really good for the owner of Goose Island because he got the $1,000. The brewer didn't get anything, and so he was not happy. But I made a friendship with that brewer, Victor Asimovich. He later went on to be the brewmaster at Hoster's. So we started Columbus Brewing, and after a few years, after a year and a half, I got called by. There was a loophole in Ohio law that if you started a brewery, you could also get a full liquor license. If I talk too much, just tell me. And this loophole was if you made beer, then you could get a full wine and spirits license in a dry area. Well, Mr. Wexner out at New Albany, he bought all this land, was putting in his project, and it got voted dry. Back then, you could only vote on issues every 4 years, so they were stuck. They had to put a brewery in right away, and so these guys came into me and said, "We need you to put a brewery in," and I had no idea who they were, and but so I put in the brewery for Mr. Wexner pretty quick, and that was in '92, and I still operate that brewery now. They've been voted wet since then, but so they don't need it as a loophole. But the members, I don't know if there's any members of the country club, but the members out there are really supportive of the brewery. So that started me, and I opened up a brewery at the Medallion Country Club for the same way. Barley's got a hold of me in the early 1992, and they said, "Would you want to come on board?" And at that time, that sounded more of a thing I wanted to do. I really liked the brew pub setting, where where you're talking with the customers as opposed to just making it wholesale and kegging it and driving around in my pickup truck and taking it down people's stairs and up people's stairs and down people's stairs and up. So I phased out of Columbus Brewing and went with Barley's, and when we opened Barley's in November '92. We opened the second Barley's in '97, and then I left them a few years ago. So that's what I've done. Now there's been a lot of other stuff happen. There was a chain that came to town called Hops. They were out of Florida, and those guys were stupid. And I told them that, and you know, guys have a lot of money. They don't like to be told that they're stupid. But I called them on the phone, and I was just interested. I said, you know, I'm a brewer, and do you need a brewer? And the guy said, we don't need somebody that knows how to brew beer because that's just part of the concept. You know, I said, man, you're making a big mistake, because you know, Hoster's was open and we were open, and they come to town. They've got Lagoon Lager and all these stupid names, Alligator Ale, and so of course they went out of business pretty quickly. So there's been breweries come and go. It's a shame that Hoster's isn't still here, I have to say, because they made really good beer. It's just that was a different business thing. So yeah, there's been up until now. You know, there's been some breweries open up, and then all of a sudden, and I appreciate when Jane said that it's booming, because what you don't say is it's exploding, because you never say explode in a brewery. But yeah, it's, you know, I mean, there's guys here that I've met once. There's brewers here that I've never met, and which I'm eager to meet everybody, because I'm kind of back. You know, I was kind of semi-retired for a while, and I'm back.
So there's that OCBA membership.
Yes, which. So anyway, that's where I came from and where I am.
Maybe on second thought, it would have been easier to we should make Scott a t-shirt that just has all the breweries and then just a bunch of lines to when you were there. Well, and Eric here, I think that's a perfect time to move along to you. You know, you kind of fit right in that middle part there where, you know, Scott kind of goes away for a little while, and, you know, I associate you and Columbus Brewing Company kind of like carrying the flag for a decent amount of time there. What really got you started with this, beyond just, you know, brewing beer yourself? And I think one of my main questions is, now that things are getting bigger, you guys are expanding, a lot of local breweries are expanding. Is there a concern when you get to that point, like veering too far towards the commercial beer brewer and away from that sort of like that local brew pub feeling where you're talking to customers and working with the consumers directly?
I think that's a conversation that we have quite a bit in the brewery, is as you grow, what's artisanal, what does the consumer see? You know, I mean, we're a really small brewery, but we make more beer than everybody else in the city combined. So what's the perception? And I think, you know, for us, the way we approach it is we're going to make a lot of IPA. It's 75% of our production. But what's that other 25% of what are those beers? What are we going to do with them? What's going on in the industry? What can we make that's going to kind of move that needle? You know, I mean, it's pretty sad to think that an IPA at this point is just passé. Like, oh yeah, that's what I drink on a regular basis. But don't you have anything else that's cool? It's like, you know, 10 years ago when my wife and I bought into Columbus Brewing Company, people thought we were crazy that we were going to make an IPA as a production beer. It was like, well, that's something you make in a brew pub and you sell 5% of, maybe. And now, you know, I mean, it's doing pretty well for us. It's paying a lot of bills, and it's going to build a pretty good-sized
I'm going to jump
brewery.
in on Mr. Humility. He's won 3 awards this year for his IPAs, 2 at the Great American Beer Festival, a gold for Creeper, bronze for Bodie, and a gold at the World Beer Cup for Uncle Rusty, right? Did I get that right?
Which answers the question of how Mary got her job. Yeah. I mean, really, think about that. Like, your job is to be beer nerd for the state of Ohio. That's definitely not a job 10 years ago. That's not really a job, but now it is. You know, all these things kind of elevate at the same time. Which, by the way, if anyone has not had CBC Bodie, I recommend that. If I could recommend a pairing, I would recommend a steak and a pillow. Yeah. It is incredibly... If you're going out for the night, make sure you factor in its potency and what you have planned, because I have been boated. I don't know if anyone is familiar. I don't know how far that vernacular has pushed around the city, but you can be boated easily. It is a potent brew. So I think this is maybe a good time. Mary, I think you can answer this, and really all three of you are qualified, so feel free to all answer this. But this is always the fascinating thing when people ask me about craft beer, and mostly I just drink it. But where is there any concern? Where is the bubble? Scott says you never say exploding in a brewery, and also you don't want to think of a scene as exploding and rising too fast. There's still such a small market share compared to the big boys. Where are we right now in terms of like this rising industry, and is there any concern for saturation or overproduction in a market this size?
Well, I can throw some numbers at you, and then I can let the experts on the scene talk. As of June of 2014, we had 3,040 breweries in the United States, craft breweries. This is the first time we've crossed the 3,000 mark since the 1870s, and the all-time high was 4,131 breweries in 1873. And think of what the population was there compared to what the population is now. So we're nowhere near the terms of what we were in the past in terms of saturation of breweries, because there used to be a brewery on every little corner in the city. I live in Harrison West. There were 2 or 3 down there. Go, Bubble.
Well, I guess maybe to focus that a little bit too. Are you competing with other local craft brewers, competing with the big commercial breweries, competing with regional and out-of-state craft breweries, or is it all three?
I think we're in a pretty unique industry. I mean, when I tell people, and I talk to my father all the time about this, that these guys are my friends, and they're legitimately my friends. It's not like a lot of the law offices here who pretend like you guys are all friends, but we know that's not true. We're in an industry, we're small enough, and there's so much opportunity that while there will someday be a competition, the truth is that what we're really going after, is if we make better beer alone, it doesn't help. So we work together as an industry and grow it. So, we're friendships with breweries all over the country. We make phone calls when we have a problem. So the competition isn't so much on a day-to-day basis. I want that tap handle, and, we're spending money into the market to get that tap handle. But at 5 o'clock, whistle blows, and we can drink together, and we're going to drink each other's product.
That was my next question, because I think that's always one of the things that I'm fascinated about. I think what are the numbers, Mary? You might be able to tell me exactly, like how many local breweries have launched in the last 5 years?
I can give you the statewide numbers. In 2012, there were 58 breweries, and as of today, actually, there's 116 in Ohio. So we doubled. There we go.
And I want to guess maybe a dozen new. In the central Ohio region, maybe not necessarily Columbus proper, but I would say at least a dozen. And I think one of the things, and maybe Scott, you can handle this, and I know Eric, you drank a lot of the local product. Are we making good beer? That's the thing, not just your own product, but as a consumer and as a fan of Columbus, I want to know, like, are we opening up a lot of breweries? And on its own, that's a good thing. But like, are we making good beer? Are we making beer that outside of Columbus, people will say, "Oh, this is worth it. The consumers are enjoying it, and it's winning awards. It's reputable, or it's legitimate." How would you characterize the overall craft beer market? Put you on the spot, didn't I?
I'll get on my soapbox anytime about that one. I think the answer is right in the middle. I think there's some really lousy beers being made, and there's some great beers being made, and some of that fits in within breweries. Making beer that people like doesn't necessarily make a great beer. There's been some restaurant chains out there that have opened breweries. You go, well, how can they sell so much? Well, a little bit of what we do is magic and marketing. A little bit what we do is art. And so I think there are some great beers being made in this city, and there are also some guys who it's going to take some time, and we'll see how long they last.
Which is the nature of true competition. let the hops rise to the top. That doesn't even make any sense. Jane already did the hoppy puns for me.
When you talking about good, I can tell a young brewer that doesn't know how to brew because they'll badmouth Budweiser. And it's a pretty common thing for young brewers because they're so cocky. The fact is that's a really well-made beer, and when I say Budweiser, I'm meaning the American. Well, actually, none of them are American-owned. That's the thing that pisses me off about it. Is they're all foreign-owned. People think they buy a Budweiser and they're buying American. That's not American. That's Belgian. And Miller's South African, and the largest American-owned brewery is Sam Adams. So if you want to buy American, you go from Sam Adams on down. But don't get me started on that part. But I think when you're talking about good, as a brewer, I taste for how clean it is. As far as do I taste any flaws, any biological flaws like infected, yeast, bacteria, whatever. And if it tastes clean, then it's just like making a pot of chili. It's a recipe. Just because I don't like that recipe, I don't like Belgian beers. I think there's that I don't get it. But that doesn't mean that they're bad. It's just I don't get it. So if people are, if good beer is beer that sells, bad beer is beer that doesn't.
And I think you start to talk about the actual, formula of a beer, the actual health of a beer. What are the advantages and disadvantages? And either one of you can take this. What are the advantages and disadvantages of brewing in Columbus? Because just on my end, I hear people say, "Oh, the water's terrible, and that's why so and so didn't want to come brew here." Or some people say, "No, actually, the water is no different than anywhere else." What are the advantages and disadvantages for you guys in terms of brewing beer in Columbus? Everything's great.
Yeah, well, no.
Drink more beer.
I mean, I don't know that we faced that. I mean, I think the number one problem that brewers in Columbus, Ohio face is space. We don't have industrial space in the city. I spent 18 months looking for a building, and we fortunately found a facility that's going to allow us to make a lot of beer. But, when I looked around the city, there isn't space here. There's nowhere to build. I mean, we've become such a white-collar town over the last 50 years that there's not a lot of buildings with 24-foot ceilings and a lot of open space. I think when we purchased the building we did out on the west side, we were told it was the only one on the market in the entire city that had over 20-foot ceilings.
And now everybody wants something like that, now that they're all gone, of course.
Columbus is good as far as, beer's 95% water. The water normally is pretty good. Now we've in recent times here, we've had some episodes where the water was funky. But that, Anheuser Busch is here because of the water and how cheap it is. That place uses half the water in the city is used by one person, and then the other million of us use the other 50% of the water. So, I mean, it's, and that was cool when they used to employ 500 people, but now there's 50 people work up there.
And maybe Mary, you can kind of take this building on this sort of because look, at this point, Columbus is making a lot of beer. We're gaining a lot of attention for that. It's only natural to look at what we can do better, what things can be what obstacles can be removed. What are your thoughts on the ABV limit? What are your thoughts on? Are you guys aware of the House bill trying to raise the limit to 26.2? Is that correct?
21%.
21?
It's 12% now, and they wanted to raise it to 21%.
Maybe I was just going for 26. Wishful thinking.
Marathon. 26.
Yeah, 26. That's a little bit much. That's marathon-ish. Is that a because obviously we have the recent Stone Brewing potential relocation here. How much are you guys interested in that? I mean, I know it'll vary brewer to brewer in terms of what type of beers you want to brew, but is that something that could increase the health of the craft beer community in Columbus or Ohio?
I think it's very important to people in Cincinnati, Toledo, in border cities that are on states that have no limit. And the only state that borders us that has an ABV limit is West Virginia. So we have Cincinnati brewers who, if they brew anything over 12%, it immediately goes to Kentucky because they can sell it there, and then Kentucky benefits from those taxes. I'll let Eric speak to how easy it is or how expensive it is to brew a higher ABV beer.
Well, for us as a company, it would be such a small. I mean, it's really not an issue. I mean, and I think what raised, and I'm going to kind of move this back. We've touched on it several times about Stone Brewing Company and why they didn't come here. And I don't believe, and I don't know those guys very well. I met with them, the great people. I think they played the state of Ohio. The Jobs Ohio, my understanding, made a great decision and didn't hand them $20 million to bring service jobs to the state. That's what they were really trying to do. They weren't going to bring in a lot of brewers. They're a brewery that builds big breweries. What they did is played us against the state of Virginia. It had nothing to do with ABV or water quality. It was about money.
When I started Columbus Brewing, the alcohol limit was 4.5%. Beer couldn't be, now you could make something higher than that up to 6%, but it couldn't be called beer. It could be called ale, porter, or stout. So we've come a long way. It was a big help when we were able to go from the 6% to the 12%. I think that helped the breweries a lot. But, beer that's stronger than 12%, I mean, you can't drink, if you're in a brew pub, first of all, you're selling very small quantities of it, and it's expensive. So it's not really a money thing.
It's barely beer anymore in a way. I mean, it's just like an experimental sample,
Yeah.
like a beer-like derivative.
There's
almost.
no
You're not-
money. I mean, you want somebody to be able to come in and have a couple pints and be able to drive home and not get in trouble,
Right.
Unless you're Sam Adams and sell Utopias for $100 and some a bottle.
Yeah.
Right.
At 26%.
It becomes more about marketing, I think, than actual consumption. And we're in the alcohol industry. It's a heavily regulated industry, and I think as an industry, we have to be aware of the consequences. As a craft brewer, we can say, well, we're going to make this beer. It's going to be 17%, and one guy is going to get together with 10 friends, and they're going to sample this and drink 2 ounces. But there are a lot of other social implications that we have to be aware of because it's alcohol. And just because we wouldn't do it doesn't mean a company, to use an example, like Four Loko, who would never do it because they've been through enough legal battles, but somebody could come in and create an 18% alcohol beer that college kids are literally going to drink themselves to death on. And I think those are the concerns. It's not, our state legislators not making a rule and not making themselves aware of the consequences outside of, we can't just we talk to them, can we do something that's just for craft beer? And you can't, it's alcohol. You can't just say it's just for craft beer, because what is that? They said, well, what if you didn't use sugar? And I said, well, the only way to make 18% alcohol beer is to use sugar. You can't just make it an all malt beer and get it that big.
Now that makes me want to ask questions about Ohio being a control state, but that would have to be a whole other forum, I think. Maybe like a forum that starts at 10 p.m. at Barley's. We could do it that way.
But, and state of Ohio is I feel like an advocate up here for the state of Ohio, but we're a really beer-friendly state. It is, when you talk to brewers in other parts of the country, they do not have some of the advantages we do. We've got, pretty understanding liquor control who's willing to work with us. They're not battling us. We have beer distributors who understand what we're going through. We're able to self-distribute. There are things that you're allowed to do here that most other states don't allow. I think overall, I don't know about ranking, but we're a top state for consumption and for friendly laws.
Yeah, there was a big change last year wherein our license went down. They created the A1C craft manufacturing license. So that went from $3,900 to $1,000. Along with that, the breweries can then open a tap room within their facility, which they had to have a separate license for before. So those two things mean pretty much every brewery now can have a tap room. So when you take people on a tour, or for instance, Four String, who's operating out of his warehouse, has a tap room that operates 4 or 5 days a week, and that's great influx of cash right back into the business and direct interaction with the consumers.
And lowers the entry point too. In
Right.
terms of local brewers, you don't have to be completely strapped to the gills. You just need to know how to make good beer and be savvy, as opposed to,
And
being loaded.
In Ohio, we can self-distribute up to 1 million barrels of beer. Michigan just fought for the right to self-distribute 500 barrels of beer.
Wow. You guys gonna do 1 million? 1 million sound good?
So I'll call you from the beach and let you know how it's going.
All right. I'll do my part. How about that? I'll do my best.
So if we consume 4.1 gallons on average per adult in Ohio, you're saying you probably double that? How many people in this room drink more than 4.1 gallons of craft beer a year? Good
year?
answer. I think we know there ain't no statistics.
Did everyone just see me go, a year?
A quarter?
Me and the whole table in front just cringed at that timetable. Like, what is okay? What is okay? What can I say? I really believe in Ohio's economy. I think from there, do you have any numbers on? I mean, I don't know if you don't. You got all you're the beer numbers
Here.
girl, but I want to know the actual economic impact.
Here, let me throw all the Ohio numbers at you. Last year, Ohio brewed 1,097,955 barrels of beer. We are fourth in the entire United States in terms of production. That's because we have Sam Adams down in Cincinnati and Great Lakes Brewing Company up in Cleveland. They account for about 85 to 90% of that total. That's an 12% increase over 2012. And Ohio's craft brewing industry has an economic impact of $1.2 billion on the state of money that goes back. That's 8 among the states.
We all did that.
Right?
That's one thing that all of us did together.
And
for Ohio.
the craft brewing industry supports over 10,000 jobs. That's everything from direct brewing to distributors to craft beer bars and down.
I mean, we only have time for about one more question, but I think this is one of the things I wanted to ask you, Scott. I mean, I think this is a perfect way to end from, and we will have a chance for people to come up and ask audience questions here in a moment. Now you have Temperance Brewing open. Did you guys enjoy Temperance today? A brand new brew, opening a brewery in Westerville, which obviously most people know, not for beer, but in fact the opposite. First of all, what a great example for the way that we've evolved as a city, as a craft brew city, for you to be back in the game and to be brewing there. What has the response been there? I mean, 'cause to me, that's one of the ultimate indicators, just anecdotally, that this has been a wholesale culture change, to be brewing beer in Westerville.
Well, the locals there are very supportive. I mean, it's not open yet. We'll find out at 3 o'clock today. But one thing we were concerned about, the reason I was late, was we were worried about ghosts and the Temperance Row ghosts. And so we had a Macedonian priest this morning come in and burn incense and bless the brewery. And I mean, it was a real thing. It wasn't a joke. And so we just want to make sure we start off on the right foot and the positive energy. And so that's, I think one thing that's nice is that it's going to be a nice presence that far north. We're starting off, we've got Eric's beer on tap. We have Barley's on tap, Elevator, North High, Weasel Boy from Zanesville, all my friends in the brewing business. And we'll have everybody, since I only have 6 taps right now for guests. So I think it's a cool thing to the movement that's happening. I'm really, really happy about it. I'm very proud to be a part of it.
Well, I can't wait to check it out. And this goes for Eric and any of the other brewers in the room today. I will volunteer to come drink your beer and exercise your ghosts if that is something that you need. I will come to CBC and drink Bodie and do my best to chase off all the spirits. So in the CMC tradition to take audience questions, I think we have the microphone right over here. If you guys would like to answer or ask some questions of the panel, go ahead and line up, and then we'll take them one by one. Oh, I forgot we thank you in advance for avoiding long editorial comments. But I don't think either of you look like those types of people.
Thank you. Chuck Taylor from Clintonville, and thank you for your original shop many years ago. Based on the number of hands that went up, are the craft breweries causing a market problem for the large producers? We mentioned Anheuser Busch is now owned overseas. I think PBR left the country last month, so I don't care who you ask that question of, but is the craft brewery industry having an impact on the large brewers in the nation?
Absolutely. Overall beer sales are down 1.9%, and craft beer sales are up 17.2%. So I would say that's a significant impact.
And the local, like Columbus Distributing, which distributes Anheuser Busch products, they also distribute Elevator and Zauber as of today or something, or recently. A week and a half ago. So they are taking notice.
Hi, I'm Peter McCray. I'm an architect here in town and have a national business as well. First thing I want to say is for all you old CMC members, look around the room and look at all the new faces and the young people. That deserves a round of applause. Welcome to CMC. I have a question that, I mean, I love tasting beer, and I do a lot of beer tastings and stuff, and it's just tons of fun, and it's become the, take the bus around thing for me and my friends. We really enjoy it. But I have a concern about the palate, the taste, and what's being done to taste. And let me tell you what I mean. For example, when Starbucks first came to the region, all of us that have been coffee drinkers forever, we tasted our first Starbucks and we went, what the heck is that, right? And then after a while, all other coffee tastes bad and all we like is really amped up bitter coffee. So we've been drinking beer ever since we were in, pre-college. And now, we've been introduced to IPAs and double IPAs and triple IPAs. And now, I go to these beer tastings and I try real hard and I try everything, but I know what I like, man. I've been introduced to this hoppy beer and I love it, right? The aroma, the taste. And so what's going to happen to our taste buds? Are we really losing the ability to enjoy beer? It sounds weird.
I think it's a shift. There's a flavor shift. I mean, that's kind of our business model, is to convert everybody away from everything else. And it's a slow, steady ship, we hope. But I think that's a big part of it. I mean, when we look at it as an industry, talk about, a 21-year-old kid today will drink very little Natty Light through their career. They're not building that, where you have people my age in their 40s who still consume that beverage. There's probably a good chance that you're going to see 20-some-year-olds today, 20 years from now, they're not going to have a 12-pack of cans of Busch Light in their fridge. So I think there is going to be a national shift, and I'm certainly counting on it, and I think our bank friends are counting on it too.
Mary, did you have something to add to that?
No, I said he's clandestinely drinking that Natty Light.
Yes.
Or old style, or, yeah.
It is like bread. You can use bread as an analogy. 25 years ago, Wonder Bread, that's all we had was white bread. And now there's bakeries all over the place. And so beer's very similar to bread in that way.
I think you still need some of those light beers too. I mean, I buy local beers in the stores. I also buy a 15-pack of Strohs. It's not like you just only buy fancy ingredients for your dinner. You still have this sort of like cheap staples I think have a place.
Steve Maurer with USDA. I was really interested to hear the comparison for the brewing industry of the past. This is in some measure going back to the future. The one aspect that's not taken place yet, of course, is the ingredients locally grown from which you could make your beers. Now, there's work going on with hops and malting barley in Ohio. But I asked once upon a time Robert Hudepole, and I've asked executives from Miller, whether if we could grow malting barley, good malting barley in Ohio, would you use it? At that time, they said yes. And I asked you, is this worth the research effort to do it?
I always say it's capitalism. If it's good, I'm going to use it. If it's not, we're not going to do it. But I think there's an opportunity for it to happen. What I'm seeing with hop growers and barley guys is it's even more capital intensive than opening a brewery and convincing people that they need to raise probably tens of millions of dollars to get it off the ground to make it worthwhile. I think there will always be a little niche business, but for it to turn into a real business in this state, it's going to be a huge capital investment.
Well, at least on the hop side, the barley, if we can find the right varieties, that's just another field crop. But I think right now, if our production, our microbreweries would support about 10,000 acres production of good malting barley, we just have to find out how to do it. Back to the future. Yeah.
Well, I'd love to not have to buy all my barley from England. It's expensive.
Hi, Dave Franco. I guess a short editorial comment. There's some people like myself who are not fans of IPAs, and you're brewing 75% of yours are IPAs. And I understand it's a trend, and you have to make what sells. But I guess part of my question, I have two questions here. One, it appears that there's some style creep. Like I tend to lean towards like Belgian triples and quads and Scotch ales and those type of things. And I find more and more often that there are hops creeping into those styles of beers that weren't there before. And I guess the question is what happened between 10 years ago when 5% of the beers were IPAs and now you're brewing 75% that created that style creep and the change of palate or whatever happening that is encouraging brewers to brew a high percentage of hoppy beers, even if that's not correct for the style?
It's somewhat, I mean, I think you could argue that it's consumer driven, or you could argue that it was brewer driven and, palates were manipulated. I'm not sure which. But I think you're going to see a big shift back. I mean, IPAs are not going to go away. I don't think there's nobody out there forecasting a trend down on IPAs, but there is a lot of expectation to see other beers come into the mix. I mean, along with our new brew house that we're having manufactured, we have a pilot system coming. They're building, same company's building in Germany for us, to be able to do those and to pilot those beers to see what else we can do and see what opportunities there are. I mean, as a brewer, I don't want to just make IPAs. I mean, it's not that exciting. It's kind of, it's like everybody will ask, what's your favorite beer to make? Well, it doesn't really matter. We're making beer. What's my favorite beers to drink is more important question to me. And I want to drink Helles lagers and Scottish ales and stouts along with IPAs, and I think you're going to see that shift. There's a little level of excitement that's pushing that market on hops, but I think you're going to see the level, kind of level out, and you're going to see more variety, because if there's 50 taps and 40 of them are IPAs, these bar owners aren't going to be able to stay in business that long.
Yeah, that's exactly the problem I have. I'll go into tap room up in Dublin there, and they literally like 49 of them will be IPAs, and one will be like a Belgian that actually tastes like one. So I guess that answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, we'll turn it back over to Jane.
Well, we have time for maybe one more question. Scott, I'll ask you this question, and anybody else can jump in. There had to be a turning point because, I was in the wine industry for a long time, and I know at some point there's a believability that you get to where somebody says, oh, yeah, this is real. This is good beer. This is real. Scott, do you remember that moment when you decided that there was a turning point, that this was really going to work, that you had arrived and people would respect it?
You mean for when I started?
Yeah.
I couldn't give it away when I started.
That's right.
One of our investors at Barley's was part owner of Max Cafe, and he wouldn't carry his own beer. So it was really hard at the beginning, but what was nice was that there were a couple guys in town that let the beer be tried. Dan Dugan at Stashes was a big influence on Barley's, because it was a music club. He was bringing in Irish and English bands, and he was a big factor for the Columbus Brewing, and which meant the brewery then could co-sponsor the English shows, and that was a real big thing. The guy that owned Red Door Tavern was a good customer, and so there were a couple guys that gave it a try. So it was a long haul. I'd make it and then drive it in my pickup truck. And
It wasn't always as like it is now, where it's popular and cool, and it
No.
was difficult.
No, I think for me there was a period where when we did beer festivals, we did events like this, people asked where they could get it. And probably 2 or 3 years ago, I noticed that question. I mean, it doesn't go away, but it's greatly reduced because the consumer now has access to the products. I mean, I think the grocery store chains have gotten it. Local restaurants have gotten it to understand how important it is to have these. It helps pay their bills. And that was a turning point for me when I realized the consumer was no longer asking that question, because they knew they had their handful of places they wanted to get that product.
Yeah, I think that's so true, and it's so telling, more so than any of us really realize. Opening up a brewery in Westerville, I would refer a book to you. How many of you saw Ken Burns' documentary? Well, there was a book written at the same time that he did the research. It's called Last Call, The Rise and Fall of Prohibition, and I would highly recommend it to you. It tells you an awful lot about not only our wine and beer and alcohol industry in the state of Ohio, but all about how our politics and taxes work too. So I recommend that to you. So thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed the forum today, and if you didn't, shame on you. How can you not enjoy a forum where we serve beer? We encourage you to continue the conversation. The breweries who are here are so gracious. They're going to let us taste some more beer, and there's ACC has provided some snacks, so we're not going to have our cookies today. Sorry, folks. And I'm already getting nudges to have another forum like this. Maybe we'll take a look at the wine industry sometime in the next year or so. You can view this forum if you've enjoyed it. You can view it on CTV, Columbus Television. Thanks so much, Aaron and Evan, the CTV guys for all their help every week. You can also see it on WOSU, PBS affiliate statewide, the Ohio Channel, and you can see it via CMC's website through YouTube. I'd like to once more thank the breweries that are here pouring, and thank Lainey Cuthbert on our staff for arranging all of this. Lainey actually wanted them to bring twice the amount of beer, just to let you know where she is. And also the Edwards Companies for being a sponsor and a friend to this group, and the Ohio Craft Brewers Association for partnering. And most importantly, please thank Travis Hoewischer, Mary MacDonald, Eric Bean, and Scott Francis. Thank you all for being here.